The time is 10:55 p.m. Behind these walls, a man is being strapped into the electric chair. An ambulance arrives ready to remove his body. At 11:02, a switch is thrown and 2,000 volts surge through him. Later, the ambulance carries away the 21st person to be executed in America this year. The death penalty here is methodical and has become routine.
The execution of Edward Benton Fitzgerald has been carried out in a manner as prescribed by the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Death was pronounced by the attending physician at 11:12 p.m. There were no complications, and Mr. Fitzgerald did not make a last statement. Thank you.
In its fight against violent crime, the United States is determined to execute more and more people. Tonight, Panorama reports how, in pursuit of that goal, this bastion of Western democracy is sentencing to death the mentally retarded, the insane, juveniles, and even the innocent. Angola Jail, in the sweltering heat of Louisiana, is the largest prison in the United States. Conditions here may be better than in the chain gang days, but in some ways, little has changed. Louisiana has something in common with countries like Iraq. Both execute juveniles. Recently, the state legislature considered a proposal to execute 13-year-olds. It failed. But there are no such inhibitions when it comes to 15-year-olds. Troy Dugar was 15 when he was tried for murder. Despite also being mentally retarded, he was sentenced to death on his 16th birthday. His lawyer is English. He's been defending death row inmates for the last 10 years. But Troy Dugar is one client who has yet to grasp the horror of his fate.
I don't think he really understands what it means to die. We've been through getting executed with him. I hate to do it, but it's part of what we have to do in these cases. And he's talked about how they'll put him in an electric chair and put all this electricity through his head and then he'll go home, which doesn't really show a great understanding of what's going to happen.
Troy Dugar's mental illness, schizophrenia, was evident even at his trial.
I was seeing the judge's face up in the sky smiling at me, and he had saliva coming out of his mouth. It was spitting, and so little drops of saliva, you know. And it was saying something. It was cursing me out. It came out frowning, then it smiled. And all of a sudden it just disappeared.
Towards Highway 90.
Troy Dugar shot dead a community worker after putting him in the boot of the victim's own car. He stole $3 and dumped his body on the side of the road. Without doubt, it was a brutal crime. The question is whether this 15-year-old was fit to stand trial at all, never mind as an adult. His parents certainly never gave him much of a chance.
When he was a small child, about 6 years old, they started giving alcohol to him. He was doing drugs given to him by those around his parents by the time he was 10 and 11 years old. By the time he was 13 and 14, he was being committed to hospitals with indicators that he was already schizophrenic.
Dr. Howard Albrecht, a forensic psychologist, has examined both Troy Dugar and all the medical reports from his childhood. Without access to these reports, and after a cursory examination, 2 state psychiatrists pronounced the 15-year-old mentally fit to stand trial as an adult.
This youngster should never have been found competent to stand trial because he clearly couldn't assist his attorneys in his own defense. He couldn't communicate with them. He didn't appreciate the seriousness of the crime.
Just how little Troy Dugar appreciated what he'd done was evidenced by his behavior caught on a security camera. After the murder, he and an accomplice held a storekeeper at gunpoint simply for biscuits, milk, and change from the till.
I think what happened after the crime was very telling. Why rob a quick shop for cookies and milk?
This was not a serious armed robbery.
This is not a serious, this is a child, I believe, getting cookies and milk as a snack.
While in prison awaiting trial, Troy Dugar's psychosis worsened. He attempted suicide and he began to hallucinate.
And I heard that the whole penitentiary was full of maggots. And the people, their bodies was full of maggots. They was killing themselves. And when they died, they turned into demons. The demons possessed their bodies.
Immediately after being sentenced to death, Troy Dugar went into further decline. He was admitted to the jail hospital. His medical notes paint a nightmarish picture of a vulnerable, confused, and terrified child.
Troy had a number of questions today. Does the electric chair hurt people?
Danger to self. Use leather restraints.
Troy asked that I call his father and tell him Troy loves him.
Danger to self. Use 4-point restraints.
Appears confused, still asking to go home with his daddy.
It doesn't give you a problem, does it, that the United States is now numbered amongst countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Iran, and Iraq, who execute minors?
Well, I don't know how many minors we've executed. We have the option to do so. As I stated earlier, those who are opposed to the death penalty are going to be opposed not only to minors, but anyone being executed. You can say the same thing about having the death penalty in general. I personally think that the countries that don't have it are wrong. I think the citizens deserve an option, a decision-making process as to if it's appropriate in that particular case. I don't think there's some sort of moral high ground because you don't have the death penalty and we do. We go to church, I believe in God, I have children, I have family, I cry, I care, but I think that we're tough. I think it's something that's necessary. I think the countries that don't have the death penalty are wrong.
It's only now that we've lost the battle of whether you're in favor of killing people that we're arguing over who you should kill and whether it should be children, crazy people, or whoever. That just makes you want to cry about the future of humanity. I mean, why is it that we do something like this to a child like Troy Dugar? What does it achieve for anything? I don't know. I don't know.
Death row inmates in Louisiana no longer face execution by the electric chair, as Troy Dugar feared. Believing it can inflict intense pain from burning, the state has replaced it with a surgical trolley and a lethal injection.
The prisoners escorted him by an 8-member strap-down team. He's brought in, he's placed on the table. All of these straps are brought in, a chest is strapped down here, and then across his lower chest, abdomen, knees, legs here. Then this is just brought up to here.
At first, an innocuous saline drip flows into the condemned inmate. Then, on a signal from the warden, a lethal mixture of chemicals is unleashed, which stops the heart. Troy Dugar is not in imminent danger of execution because he's still appealing. But his case does suggest the prosecution was out to help the victim's family exact revenge.
We looked at the case, we talked to the family members. They wanted the death penalty from the beginning. I said, he's young.
So the family had a say in this?
Well, always. Victims always have a say. We always allow, we don't do what they say, but we allow victims input because it's very, we represent victims, we don't represent defendants.
Once the prosecution process allows input from
victims
or relatives of victims,
right,
you are surely allowing into the prosecution system a degree of vengeance.
Oh, I don't believe that's correct.
Sunday worship in the Bible Belt. This is the southern state of Alabama. America is often called God's country. One issue dominating their lives today is crime. Last year, there were 25,000 murders across America.
Friend, I want to tell you today, we have a real personal devil that is on the loose in this world. You look at the statistics of crime in this world today, and you will find that indeed there is a real devil. They don't know much.
There's no conflict here between the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, and support for the death penalty. 20 years ago, only 45% of Americans believed in the death penalty. Today, support has reached 80%. Here, the Old Testament stricture of an eye for an eye prevails.
Heavenly Father, we come before you today. Father, we ask that you be in our hearts.
Members of this Alabama pressure group have all had relatives murdered in the cruelest imaginable way.
Our daughter, Rebecca McGuire Heath, who was 21 years old and 9 months pregnant, expecting the delivery of her baby any day, was kidnapped from her home in Alabama, taken across the state line into Georgia, shot through the right eye, and left to die on the side of a country road. For us, having him executed, he was no longer there to threaten our lives, but our sense of gloom, our sense of depression, so many things were just lifted off of us like some giant rock.
Here's the chicken, everybody.
Given such ordeals, their support for the death penalty is unwavering. Indeed, they think the courts are too lenient. They call themselves vocal, victims of crime and leniency. Diane Walden's father stumbled on two men robbing a house. They stole $17 from him and cut his throat.
If and when your father's killer is executed, what will you be doing that night?
I hope to be in the Attorney General's office that night with Miriam Sheehan and whoever is our Attorney General at the time, and to plead with them not to stop the execution for any reason.
One-on-one conversation.
Vocal was founded by Miriam Sheehan after her daughter was raped and murdered. She has since helped win relatives the right to describe their suffering to the jury as they decide whether to pass the death sentence. This overturns an established philosophy that victim impact evidence is emotive and prejudicial. Revenge has now been built into the American criminal justice system.
The victim impact statements read to the jury, do you think that has helped them decide to bring in the death penalty?
As I stated, I do hope so. I have no proof that it has, but I would know that it would be more difficult for them to pass a death sentence without knowing what the impact was on the victim's family. Yes, I do.
So let me understand this, is the purpose of getting the state to allow victim impact evidence at a murder trial, is the purpose to persuade the jury to pass the death sentence?
Yes. Yes. I do not deny that.
Vocal is no longer simply a pressure group. Its president has been installed in the offices of Alabama's Attorney General, where she works cheek by jowl with his lawyers, fighting to uphold death sentences being appealed. The Attorney General himself is not concerned by the charge that revenge is now part of the criminal justice system.
I've tried a lot of death penalty cases. You hear prosecutors who brag about the death penalty and they make all kind of wild comments. I don't hear a lot of that, but I'm sure
But revenge is part of it, isn't it?
Well, not for me, you know.